The CGA Tour, a podcast unlike any other. Now your host, Calvin Alexander.
Hello and welcome back to the latest episode of the CGA Tour podcast. As always, here I'm your host, Calvin Glenn Alexander, hence the name CGA. Tonight, I am joined by Jordan, the Country Roads podcast, the latest edition here for the Big 12 Huddle and the College Huddle. And Jordan joins us here from the Country Roads webcast. Jordan, how's it going?
Doing well, man. Really appreciate you having me on, Cal. Excited to talk some Big 12 tonight, and really excited to be a part of the College Huddle, meet a lot of the other shows here around the conference, and getting in with some Big 12 talk here is always fun and a good way to get through the off season. Some fun topics to talk about. So excited, man. Really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for joining. We're going to do a little bit of a fun kind of show tonight where basically some older Big 12 members are going to go through the whole Big 12 conference here and say the top three players at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, middle linebacker, defensive end, and then probably do coaches and top three teams as well. We've got time for it. So first off, though, Jordan, I got to ask here, the burning question on everyone's mind here is a Big 12 fan, Oklahoma State fan. I remember the Rich Rod days at West Virginia. How do you feel about, the Rich Rod coming back to Morgantown?
Yeah, man, it's been kind of surreal starting off, at least. A little bit there at the beginning when we first came back, or when it was first feeling like it was going to be a possibility, it felt pretty surreal. And now, once it come all the way around and in full circle to where it's a reality now, the closer we get to the season, starts to feel a bit more real. And I think, for me personally, it's also kind of full circle with my fandom with West Virginia, because when I, first kind of really started getting into college football, becoming big into being a WVU football fan, was when he was here, and West Virginia was having that great run from 05 to 07. And then, of course, how it ended to now see that 17 years later, we're going to try and bring it back around and have that type of success again. It's exciting, man. For me, when the candidate list started narrowing down in the process, when we were finally looking for a new coach and knew that he was actually involved and started looking more and more like it was going to be him, I was pulling for him, pretty much the whole way, hoping it would be him. So, for me personally, I'm really excited for it. And I think the fan base as a whole, even those that were maybe a little bit on the fence when it initially happened, have really came around when they've seen the money that's kind of been behind him donor-wise. That's led to, one of the better staffs that we put together in school history, paying one of the defensive coordinators there from Oklahoma and Zach Alley, poaching him from the SEC, getting him to come paying him more than West Virginia has ever paid an assistant coach. And then you go out in the portal and you get some really big moves as well. I mean, it's a complete overhaul of the roster, which you kind of expect. It's just a complete change in mentality and styles from the Neil Brown regime to the Rich Rod regime. And we're going to have to see how it plays out on the field. Hopefully it leads to W's, but I think if nothing else, it's going to be really exciting brand of football on the field here in year one. We'll see how long it takes them to turn around and get the program to where they want it to be. But for me, man, I couldn't be happier with it. Rich Rod's back and that hard edge is back in Morgantown, as he likes to say. So I'm super excited about it. I really am.
Yeah, I mean, the Steve Slayton, Pat White days are something of some glory days, right? I mean, that is something where you talk about all-time highlight reels and stuff you're watching on YouTube late one night. So those two guys and then a couple others, of course. But anyways, always good to hear that we got some Big 12 family coming back, and glad to have you part of the College Huddle, of course, here. So, we'll start off here. I do want to ask you just kind of off the bat, top three teams in the Big 12. What are you thinking here preseason wise? Of course, last year, Arizona State, not even top 10 preseason wise rankings from the media. So we could have it totally wrong by the end of the year. Oklahoma State, Utah were also in the top three consensus, and they didn't finish ever close, unfortunately. So what are you thinking for this year?
That's the $1 million question when it comes to the Big 12. It's always so hard to predict it preseason, right? As you mentioned there, some of the top teams ended up in the bottom last year, and then Arizona State predicted in the bottom, ends up winning the whole thing. And, the past few years have kind of been that way. I think the champion the couple years prior to that was predicted, 7th or 8th in the Big 12 preseason poll. So it seems like there's always a team that comes out of nowhere. So, yeah, like you said, maybe completely way off base here by the time the season rolls around and we get to November, December. But for now, I think looking at it on paper, BYU was a team I really liked, coming into leading up to this season. I think the situation there with Jake Retzlaff and the potential legal troubles there and not knowing, with his status being up in the air, makes me a little bit leery of what's going to happen there with them. I'm sure they'll still have a great defense, but will they be able to, perform well offensively if Retzlaff isn't there? So, for me, I don't know if I would have them in the top of the conference. I think for me, I really like Arizona State still, actually. I think Kenny Dillingham, the job that he did to turn that thing around after he was left a pretty messy situation there, in his, after Herm Edwards, was there with all the mess that they left there with the troubles with the NCAA and such, everyone thought it would be a while. Arizona State was going to be in the dumps for a while, and all of a sudden he turns it around super quick out of nowhere and goes on, almost won a college football playoff game. I think if they would have had, one of their best receivers there in that game, it may have been a different story. They do lose Cam Scatterbo, who I think is, inarguably one of the best players in the Big 12 last season. Phenomenal running back. But they do return the quarterback, Sam Levitt. They do get Tyson back, a receiver. And they brought in Udo, the running back from Army, put up a really good numbers there. We know how Army runs the ball. He's a really tough running back. I think that that's a good replacement candidate there for Scatterbo. So I like Arizona State. I like what they can bring. I think they're up there at the top for me right now. And, not far behind Kansas State. They have all the pieces, seemingly. Chris Kleiman is a great coach. Avery Johnson, I think, is a really good quarterback. And, maybe some people would think he underperformed last season, but I think he's just so young that we're just kind of at the tip of the iceberg of what he can do. They have really good pieces at the skill positions. So I like Kansas State up there. And then I think Texas Tech is a team we have to keep an eye on just because of what they've done recruiting wise under Joey McGuire, what they've done in the transfer portal, being in the top of the nation in kind of both of those areas. Obviously, they're building a good team. We'll see how quickly it pays off on the field, but I think they're a great candidate to be a contender this season. There's many other names you could throw in there, maybe as honorable mentions, but if I'm throwing together a top three at this moment, I think that's how I'd go: Arizona State, Kansas State, and Texas Tech.
Yeah, you talk about the Texas Tech just transfer portal alone. I mean, that's something that I've tried to be harping on this offseason here, where the ranking wise, they're number one, but they're number one leaps and bounds in the Big 12 conference in transfer ranking. It's just wild to see how much money they're able to put in with some new donors and for NIL stuff and everything as well too there. You touched on the running back position though for Arizona State, and they got the new transfer in. What do you think about as far as the top three running backs go coming into the Big 12 for this year?
All right. So hopefully my bias isn't showing too much with this one, but I tried to, stray away from, having to be too much of a homer with these picks and throw too many WVU guys on here. But I would be remiss if I didn't throw this one on here because I think he's that good. And more importantly, I think we were talking about Rich Rod a little bit earlier. I think him paired into Rich Rod's scheme is a perfect fit for him. So for me, I think my number one running back in the conference is Jaheim White. Back-to-back seasons with over 800 yards as a freshman and a sophomore. In his freshman season, he did it with only playing in about the final 6 games and only starting the final 2 or 3. So got, over 800 yards rushing in half a season's time. Last year, split carries with CJ Donaldson, split carries both of those seasons, really still managed to get over 800 yards rushing, averaging over 6 yards per carry for his career. And now he's going to get to be the guy and get to be the guy in a Rich Rod system that's produced, countless great running backs. Talk about Steve Slayton that we mentioned earlier. You look at Arizona when he was there with Kadeem Carey. Just last season at Jack State, he brought in a running back in Trey Stewart from the Division III level that ran for 1,600 yards and was number 3 in the country in rushing. So Rich Rod systems proven to get it done. He's been proven to have talented running backs, be able to find talented running backs. But it just so happened Jaheim White was already on the roster, and it's just a perfect relationship, I think, there with him and that Rich Rod offense. So I've got to have him up there and be able to talk about my guy. Jaheim White is my favorite player on WVU anyway, so great opportunity to be able to talk about him. Besides that, I think Bryson Washington, from Baylor, had a good season last year, over 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns. Really, I liked what he showed in his game. He had a big game against West Virginia. I think that that's something else that seemed to stand out to me as I went through and ranked some of these players. It's like the ones that had a big game against my team obviously stand out to me a little bit more, so they may rank a little bit higher. But Bryson Washington, talented running back at Baylor. I think Baylor's offense is going to be pretty good again this season. Sawyer Robertson at the helm, Jake Spavital, who spent some time in West Virginia in the past, now the offensive coordinator there, and he always tends to have good offenses, and I think Washington's a great fit for what he wants to do. So I'd probably rank him up there. And then, just mentioned him a little bit ago, Kanye Udo, the running back transfer from Army to Arizona State. When you look what Arizona State did last season with the talented running back in Scatterbo, they were able to, utilize him properly. They know what to do with a good running back. Udo's proven he can be a really good running back at Army and proven he can do it with a high usage rate there as well. over 1,100 yards there and 10 touchdowns. So that for me, I think would be the top three. But to be honest, this conference is really loaded at the running back position. There's a lot of guys that you could probably throw up there.
Yeah, there's the mass kind of a mass exodus, the year before. Of course, you got, RJ Harvey from UCF leaving, getting drafted top three rounds in the NFL. Golly Gordon, of course, got to be amiss to not mention him on an Oklahoma State podcast here, and others. But yeah, the one that stands out for me here is Jaden Nixon, which is a weird one because he was at Oklahoma State, transfers to Western Michigan, and then kind of lights it up there a little bit. And now he transfers to UCF. So we're going to have to go play him at UCF. And he has a touchdown pass in his name for Oklahoma State. It's just a weird deal, on a weird running back screenplay to our former quarterback, Spencer Sanders. So some of these guys with their COVID eligibility, all type of stuff here, we're seeing that kind of phase out a little bit. But yeah, no, I love all those picks. I'm really interested to see how Arizona State does here because Scottaboo just seemed like kind of that one kind of what college football is, where you have a guy who's running a 4.4. He's not just an athlete. He doesn't fit one skill set. He's just a wrecking ball. Like you actually could say he's a wrecking ball of a guy and someone could go, all right, I see it, and not need any other explanation. But you're not really saying that like about Saquon Barkley. There's like 7 million other things you'd say about him or whatever. And so we'll see how Scottaboo does in the NFL. But yeah, it's interesting. I really think that, to be honest, Dylan Edwards deserves a little bit of hype here just because, he was the backup behind DJ Giddens last year with K-State, and now he gets a little bit more playing time and kind of gets to be the guy there. And he averaged almost 7.5 yards per carry last year for K-State. Granted, not a ton of stuff, but he's able to catch the ball in the backfield too. And with Avery Johnson there, I'm always worried about K-State's running attack. So we'll see how they do. As far as it comes to wide receivers, what do you feel in top three wise for the wide receiver front?
I think when I was looking at the wide receivers here, I mentioned Arizona State at the top of the conference there for me. And I think that's because they have a lot of players at the skill positions. When I went through the rankings here that I have there at the top of the list here as well, and I got at the wide receiver spot, number one, I'm putting Jordan Tyson there. I think he was, a huge piece for that Arizona State offense, a huge reason they were able to win the conference last year, get to the college football playoff, and they missed him there towards the end of the season. They were still able to get it done enough to win the conference, but in the playoff, it might have been, that one little piece they were missing to get over the hump there in that game against Texas, which they nearly won anyways. But last season, 75 catches, over 1,100 yards, 10 touchdowns, and, returns with his quarterback yet again. So, you have the great quarterback receiver combo, same coach, Kenny Dillingham. They had success last season, so the confidence should be there as long as the injury is not lingering and affecting him long term. I really like what Jordan Tyson brings to the table. Then I got another Baylor player here. We mentioned their offense a little bit when we were talking about the running backs. Jake Spavital, he keeps it balanced, but they will throw the ball around. And one player that stood out last season when they were doing that was Josh Cameron. 50 plus receptions, 754 yards, 10 touchdowns, and another guy that unfortunately had a big game against WVU last year. I think that was the case for a lot of players at the skill positions, with as bad as the West Virginia defense was, but he certainly looked the part against the Mountaineers, and I think he's going to be a good receiver in the Big 12 this upcoming season. And then Kansas State, the best receiver to me, Jace Brown there, and he's right here in the top of the conference for me because I think, when you look at the guys on the list, there's a lot of good receivers in the conference, but Jace Brown may be the best deep ball threat of them all. I mean, he got his 820 plus yards with less than 50 catches. So, we're talking about a guy that had nearly 20 yards per catch on the season last year. So certainly was a big play threat. If he can do that again, we talked about the running game a little bit there with mentioning Avery Johnson and Dylan Edwards, and you have to be worried about that. And so with what you commit into the box for the running game, if you leave Jace Brown single covered, he's got the ability to beat you deep and make big plays. So I think he's up there for me. So that's probably what I would rank it as far as my top three in the Big 12. But like I said, a lot of guys that probably deserve mention there, but those are the three that came to mind right away.
Yeah, I mean, that pick there with Jace Brown, he's the guy who I think will make some names. He'll get some name recognition here for sure for K-State. Just seems like a wild, good target there for Avery Johnson to be able to stretch it out where he's basically just as fast as can be, but also 6 feet tall. He's able to get some jump balls as well there a little bit too.